hearing on Lookout Slough project. Before we begin the proceeding, I'd like to reestablish a quorum with a quick roll call. Judge Frank Damrell.
Damrell here.
Maria Maranian.
Maranian here.
Virginia Medueno.
Medueno here.
Don Natoli.
Natoli here.
Christy Smith.
Smith here.
Daniel Zingale.
Zingale present.
And Susan Tatayan present. Okay, we have a quorum. Good morning. I am Susan Tatayan, Chair of the Delta Stewardship Council, and this is the time and place of day 2 of the public hearing, including public comment on the proposed determination that contains staff's recommended findings regarding the appeals of the certification of consistency for Lookout Slough tidal habitat restoration and flood improvement project, which for convenience may be referred to throughout this hearing as the Lookout Slough project. Following public comment, the council will consider the proposed determination and, pursuant to Water Code section 85225.25, will adopt findings that either dismiss, deny, and/or remand the issues on appeal. Let the record reflect that it is 9:02 a.m. on Friday, July 16, 2021. This hearing will be conducted entirely remotely via CalSpan and Zoom. There will not be a public in-person access location. We heard yesterday from the Department of Water Resources, the Delta Protection Commission, Liberty Island Access, Solano County Water Agency, Reclamation Districts 2060 and 2068, and the Central Delta Water Agency. Today's hearing will start with public comment on the proposed determination. Please keep in mind when providing comments today that the scope of the council's review is limited to whether or not the certification of consistency is supported by substantial evidence in the record before the Department of Water Resources. After the close of the public comment period, additional time will be allowed for questions to the parties, the commission, and commenters by the council members and council staff. As with yesterday's proceedings, commenters will not be sworn in. This entire hearing will be recorded by an electronic reporter. The final transcript of the hearing and all written materials presented during the hearing will be shared with the service list and posted on the council's Lookout Slough project website as soon as it is available. If you are interested in purchasing the final transcripts from the reporters, please coordinate that with them directly. The company name is California Reporting. Their telephone number is area code 510-224-4476. As with all public comments, council meetings, this hearing is being webcast on the internet at www.cal-span.org. And the audio and video recordings will be available for later review. And Brandon, did you want to display the slide quickly for the public comment information?
Yes, apologies, just 1 second. Had a phone call at the same time for a public comment. Let's see.
Anyone who would like to provide oral public comment during the public comment period for the hearing today, July 16th, needs to contact the council.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Needs to contact the council clerk via email at engage at
It'll prompt you for that.
At engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov or telephone at area code 916-798-9817 and provide their name and organization if applicable. Those requesting to comment will be called by the council clerk to speak in the order these requests are received. Oral comments will be subject to a 3-minute time limit. If a large number of people expressed interest in providing public comments, we may shorten the limit for speakers. Alternatively, comments may be dictated or emailed to the council clerk for the clerk to read aloud to the council members during the public comment period for the hearing, which is today, July 16th. Written public comments will be read by the council clerk upon request, subject to the same 3-minute time limit as oral comments. If you would like to provide written public comment in advance of the hearing and have the council clerk read your comment during the public comment period, please include the request with your written comment and submit your written comment electronically to engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov. In the interest of time, we respectfully request that if you agree with comments made by a prior speaker, simply state that fact and add any new information you feel is pertinent to the issue. We will now open public comment to members of the public. Beck, do we have any public comments?
We do. First is Bruce Herbold, and I'm moving him over now. Actually not seeing Bruce at this moment, so we'll move on. We'll come back to him.
Sorry, really quick. We just got an email. If he might be Patty Cobb on the attendee list.
Oh, Patty Cobb. Oh, I see a Patty. Okay, moving Patty over. Bruce, can you, or Patty, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself now. Bruce, are you there? I see you're unmuted, but we're not hearing anything. Okay, maybe you're having some difficulties. We can circle back to you, Bruce. I will move on to Devin O'Day. Devin, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak and to provide comment. I'm the California chapter coordinator for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We're a nonprofit dedicated to wild public lands, waters, and wildlife. And just wanted to comment that we agree with the council staff's determination of inconsistency. I think there's several feasible options that would reduce or avoid conflicts with existing recreation uses. And we think that the importance of recreation in this area for all communities and all people that are accessing the land is really important, and not just people that have boat access. So we support the goals of the restoration, and we definitely look forward to helping to just refine the project in order to come up with a solution that is consistent with the Delta plan and that will not result in a loss of recreation. And thank you for the time to comment.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Okay, next we have Bryce Hall. Bryce, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bryce Hall, and I am the superintendent for Hanford, hired by EIP to eventually build the Lookout Slough project. I am also the Lookout Slough site safety officer for Hanford and EIP. I have been on site daily since, about October of 2020 for planning, research, and layout purposes. During that time that I've been out here, I've paid close attention to who is coming and going from the Shag Slough levee and bridge for different safety and security reasons, as well as personal hunting and fishing reasons. I do quite a bit of it myself. I have even taken the time out to get to know a few of the regular visitors up here, as well as answer questions they have about what we are trying to accomplish one day soon, I hope. And on the average day, I might see 2 to 4 vehicles that are actually utilizing the levee or bridge. And quite often it's 2 or 3 of the same locals utilizing the levee. I did see a few extra vehicles during waterfowl season, people who would kayak out to hunt and park up there. I don't see many kayaks regularly outside of waterfowl season, very few. I believe the Lookout Slough project will actually build them a better area for waterfowl hunting and will be closer to a launch point for them. With all the channels and ponds that we will create that would be open to the public, it's going to create a better hunting opportunity for them. I would know I do quite a bit of waterfowl hunting myself, and this project will be opening really beautiful new areas to use. To be quite honest, other than the few regular people that show up to the levee, quite a few of the not so common people that turn out tend to actually trash the area, dump and leave garbage. We had to pull fishing line off of 2 ducks tangled in it just this week. On other days, we got to pick up bags of trash and the debris we're constantly cleaning up. I've found drugs and other explicit materials along the levee. The county has had to send out crews to pick up trash from illegal dumping on a fairly common routine basis. Couches, refrigerators, things like that. I've spoken with a lot of landowners in the area as well that have the same issues with the visitors that come in. I would like to give credit to my favorite visitor, though. I don't know if he's listening, Delta Dave and his son. They do a good job of helping me clean up the area and are always pleasant to chat with. They like to talk about what's going on. To be honest with you, with everyone,
Mr. Hall,
there's honestly
Mr.
more
Hall?
traffic coming to and from our, yes?
your time is up. Can you wrap it up quickly?
Yeah, to be honest with you, there's more traffic coming to and from our site office than there is for recreational purposes during the majority of the year, is what I've noticed. And I will start logging that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Okay, next we have Mark Hansen. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm somewhat of a seasonal user. I'm there most of the spring. I'm there from October all the way through to January for the hunting season. I get out there and fish. I have begun taking more and more friends out on kayaking excursions out here. I can honestly say, and I don't mean to be contradictory to the previous gentleman that spoke, but I've seldom ever been there when there was less than 5 to 10 cars right near the bridge. And that's really, for me, it's the focal point of all of this in terms of access. Launching from the levee site itself is extremely difficult, right? You have to go down a fairly steep embankment with a kayak, try to find footing at the water level. The bridge access that takes you across Shag Slough is really, from my perspective, the most critical element for us being able to engage with the recreational areas that are available out there. I 100% support the effort. I'm encouraged by the expansion of the efforts, and I want to thank the council, by the way, for taking the additional review on this. I do believe there's consistently more visitor traffic than what is being reported, and I'm encouraged that the council is taking a second look at this. That's really all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hansen.
And next is Byron Buck. Byron, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I have. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Good morning. I am representing myself today. I have no affiliation with either the applicant or any of the appellants, but as former executive director for the state and federal water contractors and a consultant, I've been helping implement restoration projects in the Delta for the past 10 years or so. This is a very difficult and time-consuming process. The volume of permits and authorizations is large, and some we have found can even expire before you end up achieving the last one. So the point there is time is of the essence. There are many species at risk here, and this restoration project is designed to really implement one of the fundamental tenets of the Delta Plan, and that is ecosystem restoration. The good news is the project monitoring for the existing projects that have been implementing are showing very significant benefits. The applicant has addressed recreation issues and plans important improvements. Further delay, in my opinion, is not reasonable on this issue. There are no irretrievable commitments being made here. Further improvements on recreation can come as better planning is done and implementation moves forward. I think what we've got here really is an example of perfect is the enemy of good. We should not be aiming for perfect at this point. I urge the council to reject the staff recommendation and the appeals and certify the project's consistency with the Delta Plan, which at its core was intended to promote projects such as this. I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Byron. Mr. Buck.
Next, we have Andrew Goodman, but I'm not seeing Andrew on the list of attendees. So let's try to circle back to Bruce one more time here. Bruce, you should be able to unmute yourself. I see you've unmuted yourself, but we're not hearing anything.
And Bruce, just a suggestion, if I think we sent an email to, if you want to try calling in, we can do it that way too, if that's the easiest.
Okay, it looks like they might be trying to call in because I just saw their name disappear from the attendee list.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, Beck, and then we can circle back to Bruce.
Okay, sounds good. I still don't see Andrew, so I will read a comment from Glenn Williams. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this brief public comment. My name is Glenn Williams. I'm the Western Region Projects Director for Ecosystem Investment Partners and part of the Lookout Slough project team. Much of my work in the last 3 years has been centered on coordination with the ag community and project partners in the vicinity of the Lookout Slough. In 42 meetings, we have had we've had dozens of design iterations that resulted from those meetings. The project was modified in significant ways to reach the best balance of outcomes possible. Contrary to what you heard yesterday from the representative of LIA, there has been an extensive multi-year outreach and coordination effort with interested parties in the region. As an example, it was represented by LIA that the Trust for Public Land, who currently owns property on Liberty Island, was excluded from deliberations around this project. However, as you've seen in the administrative record, the Trust for Public Land wrote a letter in support of the proposed abandonment of Liberty Island Road. Similarly, LIA represented that California waterfowl was a critical voice excluded from the process of developing the Lookout Slough project. However, California Waterfowl is in fact a project partner owning and managing several of the conservation easements that are specifically part of the Lookout Slough project. I won't rebut each and every misstatement you heard from LIA yesterday, but it is worth noting that the collaboration with the interested parties LIA says is missing from this process, and therefore the justification for remanding the project is just not an accurate statement. I've worked in the field of land conservation for over 25 years. Public access is an issue of great importance to me personally and professionally. I applaud the leadership of the Governor, Solano County, CDFW, and DWR to address the lack of public access in the Delta through the Memorandum of Understanding process. There is a productive way to address this important issue. I hope the groups like LIA will engage in that process. Thank you. And next we have Braden Chadwick. Braden, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
You are. Perfect.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. I am outside counsel to Ecosystem Investment Partners, the property owner of the project site. I remind the Council that it is a very narrow road that appellants must travel to have any appeal upheld, and they have failed to navigate that road here. First, the certification adopted by DWR is presumed by this Council to be accurate and sufficient. The only question properly before the Council is whether there is any substantial evidence in the record that supports certification. And if there is, the appeals must be denied. EIP is concerned that this appeal has not followed the established procedures and guidelines. The procedures are clear that the proceeding is to be based exclusively on the administrative record before DWR at the time DWR submitted the certification. Despite this, the Council has accepted written and verbal evidence that's not in the record, and somewhat outrageously, DSC staff acknowledges the evidence in the record regarding recreation, but then on their own takes notice of new evidence in order to disagree with DWR's conclusions. In other words, and let me be very clear what staff's recommendation does, staff recognizes that there is actually quite a bit of evidence in the record supporting DWR's analysis on existing uses and recreation, but introduces new evidence in the record so that they can disagree with DWR's conclusions. This should not be tolerated. It is inappropriate and contrary to your own procedures. We take instruction from the California Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, quote, extra record evidence can never be admitted merely to contradict the evidence the administrative agency relied on, or to raise a question regarding the wisdom of that decision. Yet that is what staff is asking this Council to do. Again, if there's any evidence in the record and the staff recommendation recognizes that there is, this Council must defer to the certifying agency and deny the appeals. It became evident yesterday also that there's been some mission creep introduced into the appeal process. Somehow senior DSC staff not only presumed that this Council would remand the certification, but began opining on how staff anticipates working with DWR on the next go around on a range of topics, including feasibility on siting. Staff presumes too much. It is not DSC staff's job to inform or work with a certifying agency. Neither this Council nor its staff may exercise independent judgment on any of the underlying facts of the certification. This Council cannot remand the certification and then tell DWR just to go work with DSC staff. As with the last hearing, we heard a lot from appellants who never commented on the project during the public comment period. A lot of their hand waving is only meant to obscure their lack of involvement when they should have been commenting on during the public process, but when they chose not to. The last thing I'll say is that the only question for this Council is whether there is any evidence in the record to support the decision. Your staff report tells you there is, so the appeals have no merit and must be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chadwick.
We're going to try for Andrew Goodman again. Andrew, you should be able to unmute yourself. Andrew, can you hear us? Let's move on. We'll try Andrew again later. Ted Summer, you should be able to unmute yourself. Can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Great. Hi, I'm Ted Summer. I'm a retired state scientist. I have a long career working in the Delta, and a lot of my work in Yolo Bypass has been used as the basis for some of the restoration activities like this project. So I'm here to tell you that the Lookout Slough project is the single most important multi-benefit project that's being considered right now for the Delta. And I have three major points for you to consider and hopefully for your certification of the project. The first is that the project will greatly expand habitat for some of our imperiled fishes. We already know that this area is a hotspot for many types of native fishes. The large footprint, though, is something that is going to be a major boon for species like smelt, salmon, and other species. We have decades of work supporting this idea, and the location of the project is remarkable. It's kind of ground zero for exactly where we need this habitat. I'm not aware of any other tidal wetland project that's so well situated to support our imperiled fishes. Second, the project creates the potential to increase our flood conveyance in the region. Flood is one of the public safety issues in the region. We are one of the more vulnerable areas in the country. And Yola Bypass is really our major regional flood facility, but we know there's a need to provide increased flood protection. So the location of the project would provide a future option to increase flood capacity of the bypass at the lower end, which is kind of a pinch point that limits its conveyance. Third, I want to note that this is an important project for climate resiliency. I just mentioned the flood issue, but please also consider how the elevation of the project will also accommodate future sea level rise, making the habitat resilient to future change. And note that we already know the region is a key refuge during drought for smelt and baby salmon rearing. So adding this sort of habitat would provide another tool to help fish cope with increasingly extreme hydrology. So the bottom line here is this is really unique and important opportunity. I urge the council to support certification of the project based on the record and evidence. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Summer.
Next, we have Alex Ribeno. Alex, can you hear us? You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. My name's Alex Rabideau, representative of a member of the public. One of the key issues to kind of present here is really the conflict with existing water intakes. And that is within this region, you have the North Bay Aqueduct Reclamation District 2068, as well as the City of Vallejo's pumping plant station. This region is very important for local regional water supply. It provides between 50 to 100% of Solano County's water supply. It's a very important part for both Napa and Solano County. Secondly here, it's important to recognize, particularly for Solano County, that this is a Bay Delta county. This is, again, part of our local water supply. And this is not, Solano County is not the Beverly Hills of California. This is a diverse working class community that really fundamentally depends on this region for its water supply. In the next slide, as you see here, there's, between the Solano water users, there's been almost a decade of communication where there's been concerns that, again, these are really important projects. I think, as you heard from certainly some of the earlier speakers. But there's certainly a conflict between existing water use and potential large-scale ecosystem restore. And again, both are really important. But the Solano water users have actually voiced, in the record, for almost the better part of a decade, concerns with regard to this potential conflict. And then last slide, please. And so in reality, what's challenging is the ESA impact for Lookout Slough. It's highly uncertain. The goal obviously is for habitat and food production for Delta longfin smelt, other species, which is really important. I mean, this is fundamentally very important for the Delta. The incidental take permit for the North Bay Aqueduct, it also was recently changed and updated last year. It's very, very new. Some of the prior ITPs and biological opinions, they were inconsistent. Sometimes native fish species would be found within the area of compliance for the NBA, sometimes they wouldn't. And the reality is, again, the state, for many good reasons, there's a large scale push for these restoration projects in an area that makes, from an ecosystem standpoint, a lot of sense. But the problem is the risk is solely on the existing water users in the area. And that's, that's a conflict we don't want to be in. We understand the importance of these projects, the pelagic organism decline, why this is really important. But the problem is, DWR has offered no mitigation support or ways to sort of compromise or work together with the Solana water users. And so really the question that I would ask the council is does this truly meet co-equal goals? Is that really, fundamentally one of the key parts of the Delta Plan? And I think the reality is, yes, co-equal goals can and should be achieved, but there's a need for some sort of tangible mitigation cooperation from DWR for, again, protecting this really important water source for the Solana users, for 500,000 residents in both Napa and Solana County. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Robidoux. Okay, next speaker, Beck.
Next, we have Jason Smith, who I am not seeing on the attendees side. So Jason, if you happen to...
Beck, he's on by phone. He's the one that ends in 910.
Thank you. Jason, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect.
You can hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Oh, thank you so much for allowing me to comment. My name is Jason Smith. I am a recent user of the Liberty Island. I am a hunter. I use the area seasonally, and like other people that I've met, they are traveling between 30 minutes to an hour and a half away to come to this place because of the duck hunting opportunities here, as well as the very limited public lands that's available for people like me who don't own boats or members of public clubs or private clubs, excuse me. I'd also like to say that people actually go here. The studies on the shoreline fishing are complete fuzzy math. Like I've been there many, many times over the hunting season, and there's been between 30 and 40 cars. So I'm not sure what Bryce was observing when he was making his comment, but 2 to 3 cars is not accurate at all. Every time I've been there the last hunting season, I probably was there 15 times, and there was at least 30 to 40 cars, hunters, fishermen, kayakers, boaters. It's a total hotspot for locals, but also for people who are not so local, who need a place to come, and recreate. DWR at this point has no real recreational plan for hunters like myself. We'd appreciate something in writing that would give us access across the bridge to complete our, recreational activities. We would like the recreational walk-in to be considered as seriously as all the other issues, because I've seen personally more and more people that have heard about this place go out there and use the facility. So that's really like what I'd like to conclude with. Just that it's a hot spot, and more and more people have been going out there, and I don't know if their voices are being heard. I don't think they are being counted accordingly, especially as far as hunters are concerned. Yeah, especially because many of them don't speak English. That is it. Thank you for allowing me to have some time to comment. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Okay, it looks like next we have Annie, and I'm sorry I don't have a last name, but Annie, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Come on. Oh, I should hang on.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear us? I think you're muted.
Yeah, Annie, if you press *6, I believe that should be able to unmute you.
Okay, how about now?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for giving me the chance to chime in. My name's Annie Kutsuris. I'm calling on behalf of my husband. He's a police officer serving the community right now, so he wasn't able to join himself, but it was important to him that I comment on his behalf. So my husband is a seasonal hunter, and he loves to hunt at Liberty Island. And it's one of the few places locally that is open on days that he has off. And that's true for a lot of first responders who have unorthodox work schedules. So I just want to say that we support recreational access at Liberty Island, and we support the proposed determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
Okay, little extra comment there. And we have Denise Bernard. Let's see. Denise, can you unmute yourself?
Do you have me down as Denise?
I do, I'm sorry.
This is Bruce Herbold.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
Me go ahead? Was that Bruce Herbold? Go ahead.
Yes, Bruce, go on ahead.
Thanks. I would like to very much support all of the points made by Ted Summer. So I think I can be even briefer than I had expected to be. But I would remind the council of the Independent Science Board's recommendation to pursue bold actions. And in this time, the only thing I would add on to Ted is the urgency. We are faced with both heat waves and droughts right now, and our salmon are looking very grim, and our smelt are looking even grimmer. This site is in the perfect location and is well designed to benefit them if they can do bounce back from the insults piled upon them by nature this year and last year. So that part of that bounce back is very, very time sensitive. As soon as this can come on, the better chance that we can keep our salmon and smelt in the Delta. And I very much hope that that's what we can do. I think I just do want to back up Ted's comments about how valuable this site it can be, and that they are on track to implement it quickly. There are other talk about implementing restoration sites, such as in the new biological opinions, which are so nebulous, I can't imagine them ever being done in the next 30 years. But this is online and ready to go and looks to be very likely to be valuable. And because of the current conditions we're under right now, we need to get it online as soon as possible. Those are my feelings. The issues about access, I recognize all these things, but damn, I hope that we can fix this without delaying this project for another year. Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Herbold.
Okay, we're gonna try for Andrew Goodman one more time.
All right, good morning. I got my issue resolved with the muting.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm an avid duck hunter, and I drive an hour from Lodi, and my hunting partner drives from North Sacramento to go to Liberty Island to duck hunt because it's a destination. A lot of people use it. You know, Bryce Hall was talking about how he only sees a few people out there, but he didn't bring up like how many hours he's sitting there counting cars, or if he even counts them on the weekends. Most people work during the week. They're not going to be there on the week. They're going to be on the weekend. So I thought those comments were misleading. Also, when DWR purposely underestimated the use of this area to fit their narrative of mitigation, I think you should ask yourself what else they're misleading you on. The Delta smelt used to be the most abundant fish in the Delta historically, billions of these things. Now they're near extinction. And they're, you know, this is a mitigation goal for a water company, a little Band-Aid on a gaping wound. Liberty Island, when it was inundated, was decent Delta smelt habitat for a few years. In fact, there were surveys conducted by Fish and Wildlife, larval surveys that used to catch a little fish. But those surveys have stopped because there isn't, the Delta smelter are so near extinction, there's no fish even using there, even though Liberty Island is adjacent to what you want to flood now, and it's very similar tidal habitat, and it's not being used because there's no fish, there's no Delta smelt. So I don't know how inundating an area adjacent to what's already available, you expect the fish to just show up and be there. I think the problems are bigger than habitat. I think it's water temperature, lack of turbidity, and invasive species competition, mainly through threadfin shad, which occupy turbid waters, the same turbid waters that annual Delta smelt, fry, and larval fish use. Threadfin shad emerge a few weeks later by the thousands and just outcompete them. This area is a big deal because it represents an area, someplace to hunt and fish for people that don't have boats. California doesn't have many of those areas left, and it's a gem area to go to. And you know, I could talk way more in depth about why this won't matter for the Delta smelt, and it's just a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. But I just don't have the time in 3 minutes. I suggest that we focus on the use of recreational users here, because part of conservation is involving the public and getting them out there. And if you continue to slash their ability to even get out, what does that say about conservation in the future if they can't even experience it anywhere? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman.
I think that that is all that we have at this moment for public comment.
I just want to say one thing. We have gotten requests for public comments from people that have already provided public comment, and for time purposes, we're only allowing once per comment. So thank you.
Okay, so we have no additional public comment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, then thank you to all of you who took time out in your day to attend this meeting and provide public comment. Hearing no further requests for public comment, we now close the public comment portion of this hearing. We will now hear from any council members who wish to ask questions of staff, the parties, the commission, or any of the commenters. Council members, if you have questions, please specify who your question is for so that the clerk can unmute them. Do any of the council members have questions?
I do, Chair Tatayan. This is Daniel.
Morning, Daniel.
Good morning. My question would be for our commission staff, and I apologize if we've been over this. It's possible I just didn't retain it. But there's been a lot of time spent this morning on contradictory accounts of the number of people utilizing the place now. And so I'm wondering, is there a threshold in the act, in the law that guides us? If there were one person using this place recreationally, does that justify, do we then put it in the category of recreational use, or is it 100? Or I just would be curious as to whether there's some benchmark we're supposed to be operating from as we hear these various accounts of how many people are using it.
Chair Tatayan, I can take that question if you'd like.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Okay. There is no specific threshold standard that we as the council apply to this matter. It really does fall upon the department to identify, and what the staff recommendation indicates is it's the responsibility of the department to identify, using best available science, a means to estimate the existing recreational use of the site. So our finding isn't concerned with how many per se are using the site. Our finding is really limited to did the department apply best available science to determine the existing use of the site? And the recommendation that's before the council at this point in time under best available science is that substantial evidence in the record identifies that there were some inconsistencies with regard to how the department analyzed that particular use between use of the project site and use of adjacent recreational sites that would not support the best available science criterion of inclusiveness. So it isn't really a matter of the council determining how much recreational use is enough to justify it as an existing use. That burden falls on the department to identify whether that is an existing use and to what degree that use conflicts with the proposal. So that's ultimately the standard. So it's a bit of a roundabout answer, but in essence, that essentially is the standard that we apply.
Thank you.
I have one.
Yes, Maria.
I have one to the staff. We all know that, when anything has recreational uses, that creates some kind of a wear and tear. And I know that we heard from some of the testifiers that, this is just uncontrollable. And when people are there, they're damage the habitat and all that. And I'm wondering, and the answer to that is not to not let people use it, is to do the right things in order to mitigate that kind of an impact. I just wanted to ask from the staff, from what they have seen, is it something that is a serious concern? And if so, is there ways to mitigate it so that, we still are true to the restoration and restoring the delta and restoring the environment for it? So I just want to know how significant in your research and numbers that you have done, I know so in such details, if that has been a concern.
Okay, I'll begin the answer, but I'd also like to ask Avery Livingood to provide some support on this as well. The evidence that we've seen to this point regarding, or I shouldn't say evidence, the claims that we've seen to this point regarding potential downsides, if you will, of the recreational use has been largely in the commentary and the comments and testimony in the hearing. The record shows us very little with regard to that. And that's likely because, and in parallel with our finding that the department did not consider the recreational use as an existing use. So it's a little bit tricky because our review here is limited to what's on the record before the department with regard to the certification. So, and in happy to elaborate on this further through questions, but the matter that the council needs to decide is based on the record.
Understood. Yeah.
And I think there has been a lot of dialogue between the two hearings and the public comments regarding the benefits and drawbacks of the project. But it's important, I think, to remind all of us and the council that the matter here is what's in the record and what was in the record before the department when it certified.
Sure. And you're bringing up a good point, because we all can be concerned about this stuff, but it's the framework in the contours of the case we're looking at, and what are we here to make a judgment on. Thank you.
Okay. Avery, is there anything you would add to that, or does that essentially address what you would have added?
I think you covered it, Jeff. It just goes back to, we have to rely on the evidence in the record.
Judge.
Yes, we had an attorney that identified himself as an attorney in any event, who, this is directed to staff, who indicated that the evidence that the staff considered was inappropriate, and that the appeal had no merit because of the inappropriateness of the evidence presented. I would like to clarify that comment, if you can. I think I know the answer, but I think it's important that the staff respond to that kind of a comment.
Okay, happy to do so, Judge. And I think what I'd like to do is kind of respond to a larger theme here regarding, again, the council's review and the application of the substantial evidence standard. And again, it's a bit of a reminder that the council's review in this matter and the consideration of the information from the parties, again, is limited to evidence in the record that was before DWR at the time that it filed the certification. As we know, the council's appeal hearings are quasi-judicial. And as council members, the role is akin to that of a judge, being unbiased and not advocating on either side of the argument. And so in that case, when we talk about the evidence in the record, we are very limited to considering what was before the department when it certified. And the application of the substantial evidence standard does give, as many commenters mentioned, does give deference to the department with regard to its findings, as long as there's not a lack of substantial evidence to support those findings. And where we have made the remand recommendations through a lot of very thorough analysis and consideration, we've identified that the appellant, in this case, Liberty Island Access, has demonstrated that in the instances of these issues concerning recreation, that the findings are not supported by substantial evidence that was in the record before the department when it's certified. We have heard a number of statements throughout the comments and testimony kind of describing potentially why these are not relevant issues for the council to consider, because allegedly there is evidence in the record with regard to these matters. The difficult position we're in is that the record doesn't support those arguments. So that ultimately is what's leading us to the recommended finding.
I would also like to add that regarding admission of additional documentation into the record, we have exhibits A, B, and C in the proposed determination, and section 10 of the appeals procedures and section 29 of the appeals procedures do allow for the admission of additional information under section 10, if that information was before the agency that certified prior to the certification. And section 29 is of matters of general scientific knowledge within the jurisdiction of the council, or things that a court in the state of California could take judicial notice of. So there are ways to add additional information into the record under those circumstances. And we did also provide additional details in response to some of the DWR comments into the proposed determination, just to clarify some of these admissions and some particular points that they made. So there is a way to add additional information to the record after the agency that certifies provides the record for their certification of consistency.
Thank you.
Virginia, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
No problem. Thank you, Judge, for asking that question, because I had it highlighted in my notes as well. And Jeff and Vera, thank you so much for explaining, because that was the other part of my question. And how are these records, or how were these records introduced, and are we within the confines of the law? So thank you all. So what I'm really challenged with is there's no question that this project is key and it's critical and it's necessary and we all support it. The challenge is, however, that we have to do our job, again, providing due process with what the evidence was presented, and what we are making a decision on is, again, the evidence that was introduced in the record. So my challenge right now is, and I guess this is a question for staff, is, and this shouldn't in any way steer my direction and where we need to go, but it is, and ultimately, how would this project be delayed now that we are looking at your recommendations? But how long will it delay the project, or does it need to delay the project?
Should the council approve the staff recommendation, the department would be required to resubmit a certification of consistency to the council pertaining to the findings. So addressing these two recreational issues. That process then has the same timeframes as this current appeal matter. So it would be the 30 days of filing, the 60 days to the hearing, and the 60 days to the decision. Should the council approve the proposal, we're prepared to do our role in that process through providing expedited early consultation with the department, and then moving that process forward as we're required to under statute. As to how long that would delay the project, I would be speculating, and I hesitate to do that.
Totally get it, Jeff. Again, but the execution of this restoration project, again, ultimately lies with us as council members ensuring that they meet the co-equal goals under the plan. So there's no way around that. So I guess that's what I'm grappling with, but you've kind of explained it. So thank you.
Thank you, council member.
Any other questions from council members? I don't see any hands raised, so I have a question for staff. Going back to the June 28, 2021 letter from Department of Water Resources, on page 5 of that letter, they explain that they did look at existing uses, and then they cite the draft EIR explaining that the loss of shoreline fishing for pedestrians at the reserve is small in comparison to other opportunities in the Delta. And of course, as we've heard from DWR and in letters from Department of Fish and Wildlife and from Solano County, these three parties are planning to collaborate to address some of these issues. So I'm asking staff, could you explain to me again, in layperson's terms, the DPP2 issues? Why are they recommended for remand?
Happy to do so, Chair Chatayan. So DPP2 requires that projects be cited to avoid or to reduce conflicts with existing uses when feasible. And again, bears repeating again, the council's review and consideration of information from the parties in this matter are limited to evidence that's in the record at the time of certification. And that record reflects that public uses of Liberty Island Road and Shag Slough Bridge and access to the Liberty Island Ecological Reserve are existing uses and used for recreational purposes. And there's not evidence in the record that DWR considered the potential conflict with those recreational uses when it cited the project. In the various presentations that we have heard at both hearings, there's presentation of evidence that is not in the record and can't be used to support the certification. And just want to really clarify that, you know, one of our procedural matters here is that the oral testimony in hearings is not itself substantial evidence if it's not supported by the record. And by way of review, the record demonstrates that the project would in fact cut off public access to this portion of Liberty Island Road, the Shag Slough Bridge, and the pedestrian access to the reserve. There's a number of quotes that are present within the draft certification, I'm sorry, not the draft, the proposed certification drawn from the draft and final EIRs that do make statements such as the sole terrestrial access point to the reserve is the Shag Slough Bridge, which is not currently accessible by vehicles for foot traffic only, and would no longer be accessible following the road vacation. And that's from the draft EIR. There's evidence regarding the DWR's evidence regarding the public's ability to access the new boat ramp is not in the record. In fact, the record reflects the opposite of that the public would not be able to access the new boat ramp. The final EIR says that the project would provide non-public internal access to the Duck Slough Levee, the Cache Haas Slough Levee, the Cross Levee, and the northern portion of the degraded Shag Slough Levee. And a gate would be installed at the northeast corner of the project site on the southern side of Liberty Island Road at Shag Slough in order to restrict public pedestrian and vehicular access to the project site. So there are these statements in the record that do not, these pieces of evidence in the record do not sort of support the oral testimony that's been provided. And we're just at a stage in the process where at the hearing, the agency cannot provide new evidence that is not supported by the balance of the record or testimony as evidence that's not supported by the balance of the record. So again, we're limited to what the record provides for us. And that in essence is what supports the staff's finding on DPP2 is that the record really does have these pieces of evidence that describe the access to that boat ramp as non-public and limited.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Is that helpful, Chair Tatayan?
Yes, it's, thank you. Well, if there are no other, oh, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quickly, and it was kind of prompted by your last question and response that Jeff gave. I just wanted to clarify a point then. As you were responding to Chair Tatayan's question, Jeff, when we talk about the record, so yesterday there was testimony by representatives from the department that related to work that's anticipated relative to an MOU with various parties, including Solano County and the Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. But that has come subsequent to the record upon which you as staff and we as the council are considering, you know, a determination here. And so I just want to be clear. So not that that's not meritorious or, you know, certainly welcomed as, you know, as to what outcome might come of all that, you know, this regional and collaborative process for more inclusive access. But that wasn't part of the record. Is that correct, Jeff? So, I mean, you know, statements have been made. We've heard from any number of parties, but I just want to be clear that to your point, the point that Chair Tatayan asked about, is that accurate?
So to be clear, the memorandum of understanding that underscores the partnership that you're describing is a part of the record.
That is a part of it.
However, the outcomes of that which would lead to the recreational improvements, have yet to be realized.
They're unknown because the work hasn't. Okay.
Right. And the MOU is in the record. It documents an agreement to work with the county and other appropriate entities to identify those future recreational opportunities when they're achievable with project objectives. But that MOU doesn't commit the department to a specific action, including actions that would avoid or reduce these conflicts. It's an agreement to work together toward mutually beneficial outcomes, but it doesn't speak specifically to the issues that we have in front of us on appeal at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for clarification and for correcting what I was referencing. So thank you very much. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, last call for council questions. Hearing none, does staff have any questions for council members or the parties or the commission or any of the commenters?
We do not at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay. So the council will now consider the proposed determination. Would any of the council members like to speak? Maria?
Yeah, I can go. So, it's we've been listening to this for the second time in more details. Very apparent the work that the staff has done, and I'm really impressed, and I congratulate on the depth and of the work that they've done and how closely they analyzed it. And during the testimonies, we heard that all these organizations do not have to bring their positions to the Delta, and we have to decide. People can decide and move on. However, I disagree, and I think that one of the ways to really achieve a better outcome is the work that we're doing, collaborating and in collaboration. So I am leaning towards the remand, knowing the importance of the project, but also the details and the importance of the comments and analysis that the staff recommended. And I would want to go with the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Maria.
Is that a motion?
Well, let's hear from other folks before we.
It could be judged. I mean, if there is, I would like to make a motion. If there's, yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. But before we proceed with the vote, I just want to offer some thoughts here. In the Delta Reform Act, the goal of protecting, restoring, enhancing the Delta ecosystem is co-equal to the goal of providing a more reliable supply of water for California. And both are to be accomplished while protecting and enhancing the unique cultural, recreational, natural resource, and agricultural values of the Delta as an evolving place. And, I, for one, I wholeheartedly agree that we all need to work together to expedite this high priority restoration project. So restoring habitat at landscape scale, large landscape scale, is a cornerstone recommendation of the Council's Delta Plan and a key directive of the Delta Reform Act. My tough decision here is that the Delta Reform Act also requires the council to balance the various state goals for the Delta so that as much as possible, progress in achieving one set of goals doesn't occur at the expense of other goals. So restoration goals must be pursued in the context of consistency with applicable regulations in the Delta Plan. And recreation access is lacking in the Delta, and as required by the Delta Plan, even important multi-benefit projects like this one must consider how to avoid or reduce conflicts where feasible with existing recreation uses specific to the project site. And thanks to staff's explanation, I think I better understand the DPP2 issues and the specifics of this project site. I am heartened by the comment letters we received this week from Solano County Board of Supervisors and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. These letters emphasize that Department of Water Resources is committed to collaborating with Solano County Department of Fish and Wildlife, local communities and others to find the solutions to these recreation access challenges. And I just want to say that the council stands ready to work with the department to address the council's findings. There is a path forward for Lookout Slough, and I hope we can begin that path really soon. So, thank you, members. We have a motion by Councilmember Moranian, second by Councilmember Madueño. The motion is to adopt the
I think
proposed.
second was Councilmember Smith.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christy. Excuse
That's
me.
Mhm.
Second by Councilmember Smith. The motion is to adopt the proposed determination and the findings contained therein and remand the matter in part to the Department of for reconsideration on the issues recommended for remand under Delta Plan policies GP 1B3 and DP P2 as set forth in the proposed determination, and deny the appeals in part on the issues recommended for denial as set forth in the proposed determination, and dismiss the appeals on the issues recommended for dismissal as set forth in the proposed determination, and direct staff to make such non-substantive grammatical and formatting changes as are necessary to create the final version of the determination document. So Beck, could you please call the roll call vote?
Yes, Madam Chair. Councilmember Damerel,
Damerel, aye.
Councilmember Madueño,
Madueño, aye.
Councilmember Memranian,
Chair Katine, it looks like we actually might have lost Councilmember Moranian. I'm not seeing her on the screen.
Yeah, I don't see her either. Well, let's proceed with the vote, the roll call, and hope that Maria's technology gets her back here.
Councilmember Natoli,
Member Natoli, aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Smith, aye.
Councilmember Zingali,
Zingali, aye.
and Chair Tatayan.
Tatayan, aye. There's Maria.
Sorry, I lost connection for a minute. My
Wait,
internet something was wrong. Thank you.
Sure, Maria, you were up to vote.
Yes, aye.
Okay.
The ayes have it, and the motion passes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the ex parte communication restriction related to the Lookout Slough project is now lifted. With respect to administrative next steps, our clerk will certify the council's official final determination. Once that is done, council staff will transmit the certified determination to you via the listserv service list, and also post it on the council's webpage for this specific covered action appeal. As I mentioned earlier today, once we have the final transcript, we will share it with you via the service list and post it to our webpage. And so thank you to all participants and attendees. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you.
So before, council members, before we move on to regular council business, I'd like to take just a short 5-minute break. Come back at 10:23. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair Tatayan, the floor is yours.
Okay. So on to agenda item 5, the consent calendar. Council members, due to a revised staff report for item 5B, the California Sea Grant contract, I'm removing that item from the consent calendar and we'll take that item up. Item 5B, take item 5B up immediately after we dispense with the consent calendar. So are there any public comments on the remaining items on the consent calendar?
There are not. Oh, I'm sorry. I think Deidre Desjardins has a comment on 5B.
Okay, let's hold that until we take up 5B.
Okay.
Council members, any discussion on the remaining items on the consent calendar? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
Okay.
Second.
I think Virginia beat you to the second, Judge.
That's okay.
So motion by Councilmember Smith, second by Councilmember Madueño. Let's take the vote, starting with Judge Damrell.
Damrell, aye.
Virginia Madueño.
Aye.
Maria is not back yet. Councilmember Christy Smith.
Smith, aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, Don Natoli.
Yeah, Natoli, aye.
Councilmember Zingali.
Zingali, aye.
And Tatayan, aye. Motion is adopted. So let's see, we're now on to agenda item 5B, consideration and possible approval of a contract with the Regents of the University of California, San Diego, California Sea Grant for Delta Independent Science Board and Delta Science Program staff. And let's move to Jessica Pearson.
Good morning, council members. Today, we are asking for your consideration to approve a contract with California Sea Grant that has two main purposes. The primary purpose is to help provide additional support to the Delta Independent Science Board to make progress on their work plan through the provision of 2 postdoctoral scholars who would work at their direction. The contract would also provide us access to scientific experts for the Delta Science Program to help complete peer reviews on projects that the lead scientists may recommend for future council funding. Please note there is an updated staff report for this item, as Chair Tatayan mentioned, that provides additional clarity on the breakdown of funding. Dylan Stern, Program Manager in the Science Program, is here to provide a brief presentation on the item and then answer any questions.
Morning, Dylan.
Good morning. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Chair Tatayan and council members. It's good to be with you today. I'm Dylan Stern, Program Manager for the Science Funding Processes and the Delta Science Program. So Jessica already introduced the contract. You know, at a highest level, it's really services under this agreement would provide academic and technical expertise to support the work of the Delta Independent Science Board, and also to inform Delta management decisions and support the implementation of the Delta Plan and the Delta Science Plan. There are 2 major components in addition to project management. The first is identification and administrative support for the 2 postdoctoral scholars that will provide technical support to Delta ISB. And then the second component is coordination of technical experts to support the proposal review process for non-competitive critical science investigations, independent scientific peer review, advice, synthesis, and science workshop panelists. It's important to note that the Delta Science Program has always contracted with other entities to help provide these essential services in pursuit of the Delta Science Program's mission to provide the best possible unbiased scientific information to inform water and environmental decision-making in the Delta. So a few more details about the contract. California Sea Grant will administer the recruitment, selection process, and compensation for 2 Delta Science postdoctoral scholars. And they will be selected jointly by the Delta lead scientist, Laura Larson, Delta ISB Chair, Steve Brandt, and the director of the California Sea Grant Program. So like Jessica mentioned, they will provide support for 2 years by performing research, analyses, and drafting preliminary reports. And I can go into more detail about that if you have any questions. And then the second part, where the Delta Science Program will be receiving support for technical expertise and for relatively small size syntheses, workshops, and review efforts. These are actually some of the most valuable and impactful investments that have been made by the Delta Science Program. And so these efforts would be continued under the proposed agreement. The agreement also allows for open access publication fees. The Delta Science Program advocates strongly for articles to be published in open access journals, some of which can be prohibitively expensive. So open access to scientific publications ensures a more inclusive and transparent science community in the spirit of One Delta, One Science. So this agreement will provide up to $4,000 for open access publication fees for synthesis publications. And just to clarify the change to the staff report, you'll note in the budget table that the first category in the budget is for the postdoctoral researchers and California Sea Grant staff support. Previously, there was an error that didn't characterize this correctly. And then the second budget category is for the subject matter experts for reviews, syntheses, workshops, panelists. And then we also broke out the open access publication fees and indirect costs in the budget table. So now I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this and go into more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Council members, any questions for Dylan?
Madam Chair, this is.
Yes, Don.
Yeah, Dylan, thanks for the presentation. And I think it's understood, but I just wanted to ask to I guess make the point. The intent of this is to supplement and provide further support for the work of the Independent Science Board, not to supplant or substitute for work that would be performed by members of that board. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So the products from the postdoctoral scholars will not in any way substitute for the final reports and recommendations of the Delta ISB reviews, which are solely authored by the Delta ISB members.
But they would be working in concert with the scientists who are a member of that board. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dylan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Certainly. Any other questions? Okay. Well, in that case, let's move. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, Judge. Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve the contract with the Regents of the University of California Sea Grant for these fellows by Judge Damrell, second by Councilmember Natoli. Let's take a vote.
Public comment. Don't forget the public comment.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thanks, Jessica. Any public comment on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Deidre Desjardins. And Deidre, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. It's Deirdre Desjardins with California Water Research, and I wanted to thank the staff and for their clarification on this item. I wasn't able to access the staff report. There might be an issue with the link, but I think it's really important to break out the support for the Delta Independent Science Board. The other issue I have is we are hoping that the same number of total contract hours can be restored. It was about 375 hours, up to 375 hours a year for members and up to 450 hours a year for the chair of the ISB in the contracts that were withdrawn around June 30th and sent back by the Department of General Services of last year. So just, you do have a $4 million contract and grants cap in the budget. So I'm just hoping that that with the 25% reduction in compensation, that there will be enough room for restoring the full contract hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. Okay, now on to the vote, starting with Judge Damrell.
Damrell, aye.
Virginia Madueño.
Aye.
Maria Moranian. Maria was on mute, but I'm reading your lips.
Moranian, aye. Thank you.
Don Natoli.
Natoli, aye.
Christy Smith.
Smith, aye.
Daniel Zingali.
Zingali, aye.
And Tatayan, aye. A motion adopted. On to agenda item 6, the chair's report. For the chair's report, I'd like Amanda Bowl to give us highlights of the most recent Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee meeting that occurred July 12th. Is Amanda with us this morning?
Yeah, just one second. She's getting
Oh.
worked on.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, Amanda.
Pause as I got moved over. So yes, thank you, Chair Tatayan, and good morning, council members. So during Monday's Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee meeting, California Department of Fish and Wildlife Director Chuck Bonham facilitated a panel exploring ecosystem-based management during drought. And so this panel included representatives from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, California Department of Water Resources, and the State Water Resources Control Board. Committee members also heard updates on Delta science activities, including the Science Action Agenda, Social Science Integration, and the 2019-2020 Delta Crosscut Budget Report. So today I'd just like to highlight two of the agenda items. First, the drought panel. All of the panelists and Director Bonham stressed the need for us to be considering drought as kind of this new normal. You know, in fact, Rosemary Hartman, the representative from Department of Water Resources, noted that it's really easier for us to plan for drought and then walk back from those plans if there is no drought rather than vice versa. And Delta Water Master Michael George summed up the lessons learned from past droughts that other speakers also touched on, namely that response depends on credible, accessible, and shared data, advanced planning trumps emergency response, and then we have more scientific data than synthesis, but synthesis is increasingly happening. In terms of moving forward, all of the panelists, one way or another, touched on the strong role that collaboration plays in planning and in our response to drought. Second, the fiscal year 2019-2020 Delta Crosscut Budget Report was released. This is the second annual edition of this report, which was created in response to findings from the Delta Science Funding and Governance Initiative, which included or called for better understanding of how we fund science. And it's still really too early to use this data, the second year of data, to really make any policy recommendations or to do any really comparisons over the years. But over time and with more years of data collected, we'll eventually be able to do so. And we're really optimistic that with 2 years under our belt and us continuing to kind of adapt the process to make it better and stronger, that this information will be of great value to the Delta Science enterprise and to decision makers over time. So this report is now available on the council's website, and I'm happy to send and share the link with anyone who's interested. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Amanda? So I just wanted to say that the panel was an excellent panel, and the guest facilitator Chuck Bonham did a terrific job. So if you didn't attend the meeting and you do have time to review the recording, it's worth it. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties when it came to the science updates. So again, I'm eager for the day when we can meet in person. But is there any public comment on agenda item 6?
There is, Madam Chair. Deidre Desjardins. Well, I will unmute now.
Thank you. Deirdre Desjardins, California Water Research. I wanted to point out that the Delta Crosscut budget was actually something that was done by the Cal-Fed Bay Delta Authority and was done by the Stewardship Council for a number of years. It appears to have been discontinued around 2016. But there was joint federal and state reporting aligned along the purposes identified in the Cal-Fed Record of Decision, which included, as well as ecosystem restoration, water use efficiency, levees, levee integrity. There was a number of program categories. And so I hope that as this goes forward, I think those categories were useful. And also I noticed that in 2016, which was the last year the Delta Council had done the crosscut budget, it was discontinued for a while. one could look and see the amount of funding that was spent for the Delta Independent Science Board. And I think that's helpful to track as well, because the public law for CalFed is still on the federal books, and it does require an independent science board. And there's also the Delta Reform Act statute that creates the independent science board. So I think having a tracking of funding for peer review and specifically for the independent science board is a good idea. So thank you. And it's a very good report. So thank you for your efforts.
Great. Thank you, Deirdre. So on to agenda item 7, public comment on any topic not on the council's agenda.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Deidre Desjardins.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank the chair for her efforts for the Independent Science Board, and particularly I was very moved by how compassionate she was with the Independent Science Board at the July 13th meeting. So, and thank all of you for your support of restoring compensation for the Independent Science Board. It's very meaningful.
Well, thank you for that acknowledgement, Deirdre. I really appreciate it. The council depends on and deeply values the Independent Science Board. So thank you for your comment. Any other comments, Beck?
No, Madam Chair.
Then on to agenda item 8, Executive Officer's Report.
Thank you, Chair Tatayan. Good morning. Quick Executive Officer's Report after a long 2 days of meeting. We've got some exciting news for our Delta Adapts climate team. Along with the Department of Water Resources, the team has been invited to present on Delta Adapts and our efforts to align that program with the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan at the Floodplain Management Association Annual Conference this September. The talk is entitled Aligning Climate Change Efforts in the Delta, Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, and Delta Adapts. So congratulations to our staff member, Corey Copeland, who will be presenting on behalf of the council at the conference. I want to acknowledge the hard work of the council and the staff for all the efforts over the last 5 months as it has considered the appeals on the Lookout Slough project. It has truly been an all hands on deck effort, and many of our other efforts have had to shift to the back burner temporarily. We've had a difficult but very important job, one that was crafted carefully and intentionally in legislation, and I do appreciate the time and effort that everyone put in to the appeals and ultimately the determination. Since our last meeting, the council sent a letter to the Dudley Ridge Water District in Kings County regarding the notice of preparation and consideration of a negative declaration. And this is for their adoption and implementation of a 2020 agricultural water management plan. The letter states that while the plan itself is not a covered action, specific projects implementing the plan could be, including multi-year water transfers. So the letter encourages the district to engage in early consultation to discuss potential implementing projects that may need to show consistency with the Delta plan. I don't have any personnel announcements this month. The outreach highlights report, the active projects list, and our quarterly contract report are available in your board packets. And at this point, I will move to, we do not have a legal update, so I will move to ISB legislative update and invite Ryan Stambra to address the council on the status of SB 821 regarding Delta ISB compensation.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Pleasure to be back before you this morning. As Jessica said, I'm Ryan Stambra. I'm the Council's Chief Deputy Executive Officer, here to provide a brief update on Senate Bill 821 by the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee, which was amended on July the 5th. As you may recall, SB 821 previously did three things. It stated that members of the ISB were not employees of the Delta Stewardship Council, affirmed that members of the ISB would continue to exercise their own scientific judgment and conduct their statutory mission independent of the council, and directed the council to contract with members of the board at an hourly rate equivalent to that of a research specialist 5. While the first two provisions mentioned remain in the bill, the July 5th amendments did two things. First, it revises the proposed compensation to a rate of $150 per hour, which would be increased annually based on inflation and cost of living adjustments. And secondly, SB 821 now includes an urgency clause, meaning the bill would take effect immediately upon signature by the governor. If that were to occur, council staff would then immediately move to execute new contract agreements for each independent science board member. In terms of status, SB 821 passed out of the Assembly yesterday on consent and is anticipated to be taken up for a concurrence vote in the Senate when the legislature returns from its summer recess in mid-August. And that concludes my update on Senate Bill 821. Happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Any questions for Ryan? I want to thank Ryan for pretending to be the ledge director while also serving as chief deputy and helping with the appeals. We're a small agency and people have to learn how to wear multiple hats, and I appreciate his efforts in stepping in to provide these updates. So with that, I'll conclude my executive officer's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. So that is fantastic news that we're making a joint presentation at the Floodplain Management Association. Yay, Corey. In my previous job with the Nature Conservancy, I attended the Floodplain Management Association conferences. They are excellent conferences attended by hundreds of people. So that's great news. And also, I want to also chime in about our staff's phenomenal, rigorous work on the Lookout Slough appeal. This is one of the more complicated projects and evidence of how difficult it is to balance all of our mandated goals. And I think the staff did a thorough, careful, rigorous analysis of the record. And I want to really congratulate staff for an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no council member questions or comments, we'll move on to public comment. Any public comment on agenda item 8?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have Deidre Desjardins.
Yeah, Deirdre Desjardins, California Water Research. And the Delta Independent Science Board has an in-person meeting on August 19th. So it looks like their travel expenses will be reimbursed for the first time as exempt employees. And I just wanted to make sure that the conditions for the state controller's office to approve the travel reimbursements are met. I did run across some information that indicated that oaths of office needed to be filed with the Secretary of State before State Controller's Office would approve any expenses. And I'm not sure how that's going to affect it. I'm not sure that the ISB compensation is actually carried on the books as a employee expense. It may still be carried as under personal services contracts. But I do want to make sure, ask the staff to make sure that they can get reimbursements promptly, particularly the members that are coming from East Coast. I did discover that the certificates of oath for the Delta Independent Science Board have never been filed with the Secretary of State. And it doesn't seem like they've been sworn in. It might be an accident of history, because the CalFed Independent Science Board wasn't a standing state board. It was just a science panel that was convened by the Bay Delta Authority. But appointed board members are state officers, and there actually is an oath requirement, at least as far as my attorney was able to ascertain, and we did look very closely at the government code. So thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. Any other public comments, Beck?
Madam Chair, there are not.
Okay. On to agenda item 9, lead scientist report with Dr. Laurel Larson.
Thank you, Chair Tatayan, and good morning, council members. Could I please get the slide for today? I'm going to start this report as usual by profiling one of the papers in the literature, and then I'll go into a discussion of some of the current and upcoming Delta Science Program activities. So today I'm going to be discussing a paper that deals with salinity. Salinity is one of the top, if not the top, management concern in the Delta during critically dry years like the one that we're in right now. And it's also one of the most complex management concerns, as many trade-offs are involved. Drought conditions and the need to maintain cold water pools and upstream reservoirs mean low inflow into the Delta, which, absent further intervention, would mean more saltwater intrusion into the Delta, potentially endangering the freshwater project intakes in the South Delta. Managing for appropriate salinity levels for humans and wildlife requires a combination of reservoir releases with all the trade-offs they entail, and more recently, the construction of a salinity barrier on the False River. There's a lot of uncertainty, though, surrounding the optimality and impacts of these management strategies, and a lot that remains to be learned about salinity in the Delta fundamentally. In fact, the adaptive management of salinity is probably one of the areas that stands to benefit the most from improved scientific knowledge. So in recognition of this, the Delta Science Program funded a symposium on salinity back in 2018 that was titled Ecological and Physiological Impacts of Salinization of Aquatic Systems from Human Activities. One of the products of that symposium was a synthesis paper led by Cameron Golombor that just came out in the most recent issue of San Francisco Estuary and Watershed Sciences. The paper begins with an overview of the historical drivers of salinity in the San Francisco Estuary and of historical salinity patterns. And as you might imagine, prior to the construction of levees or the diversion of flows for human use, freshwater flow volumes were the primary driver of salinity levels within the estuary. Due to the high intra-annual variability in those freshwater flow volumes, salinity levels were also variable in space and time, more so even than today. However, the salinity levels that were associated with particular inflows historically were lower than salinity levels in the contemporary system associated with those same inflows, which is primarily due to recent sea level rise. A primary focus of this paper was on the ecological consequences of salinity intrusion into the estuary in hopes of anticipating forthcoming changes due to sea level rise and targeting specific species for protection. Native species within the Delta naturally have some resistance and resilience to salinity changes, which is a capability that evolved as a result of salinity fluctuations historically. Many species adapt to salinity changes by moving, but with the substantial loss of habitat in the 20th and 21st centuries, there are fewer places to move to now. Species may also acclimate or adapt, provided the rate of change of salinity is slow enough. Despite the ability of many native species to tolerate limited salinity changes, though, they might be placed at a competitive disadvantage that could be the final straw for already critically endangered species. For example, Delta smelt exposed to more saline conditions show reduced overall body condition compared to individuals in less saline environments. On whole, impacts of salinity changes on species in the estuary are species specific, and many of these changes are going to be difficult to predict. For instance, salinity is likely to adversely impact many of the native plants that form the basis of the food chain, which will have cascading impacts. Also, although at present year-to-year salinity variations are more muted than they were historically, this is likely not to be the case in the future. Climate models predict that the Delta will increasingly experience flood conditions in the future, which would correspond to low salinity events. Alternating critically dry, high salinity years with extremely wet, low salinity years, one of the consequences of the weather whiplash we've talked about previously, will create a swinging pendulum of salinity levels, unlike what ecosystems have seen in the past, which imposes new stresses on native species. So to better manage for a more resilient Delta, the last part of the paper addresses several high priority calls to action. One is a strong call for improved physical models that integrate different management strategies and climate change scenarios. Personally, I would like to see such models in the associated scenarios developed during non-drought years with extensive stakeholder engagement from the outset, with the aim of creating a decision tree on future actions to take in the face of drought or climate change. The authors also issue a call to action to prioritize better understanding of ecological and biological responses to increased salinity, combining both field and laboratory approaches. And then third, the authors recognize that many of the actions taken or under consideration to manage salinity within the Delta, such as the drought barrier recently erected on the False River, or operation of the Sassoon Marsh salinity gates in a manner other than that originally intended, are largely experimental. They urge this community to leverage those operations as rigorous scientific experiments to maximize learning. Accordingly, I'm happy to report that much of the scientific planning is already underway for the newly re-erected salinity barrier, though it does feel rushed. Our science community would really benefit from more deliberate anticipatory planning for a scientific framework associated with these operations under non-emergency conditions. So in addition to helping prioritize science needs during drought, this paper has relevance to the Council's Delta Adapts initiative as it suggests possible strategies for adapting to increasing levels of salinity and anticipating vulnerability of specific Delta fish species. Its call for improved modeling is also in line with the Science Needs Assessment Work Group's call for developing forecasting capabilities, with salinity as one of the primary variables to be forecasted, which has been a focus of their ongoing discussions. So with that, I'd like to pause here and ask if there are questions on this particular report before I get into a discussion of Delta Science Program activities. Councilmember Smith.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Larson. Interestingly enough, just this morning on the news, watched a report about our struggling salmon here in California, and it was largely due to interior waterway temperature rise. And of course, we have this double burden in the Delta region with salinity and its interaction too. So as you know, folks writ large are thinking about climate policy, it's often reported to the public as simply a matter of ocean temperature rise, but really it's our interior waterways that are now facing these increasing challenges, which has significant impacts on all of our ecosystems. So I thank you. This is a really, really timely presentation. So thank you for the information.
Thank you for that comment. And I'll also point out that in Maven's notebook a little bit earlier this week, I don't remember what day it was, it might have been about 2 days ago, there was a similar report on current temperatures and their impacts on salmon. And I'll say that folks within the Delta Science Program right now are undertaking massive efforts to do a synthesis of temperature data within the Delta and figure out how it might be impacted by reservoir operations upstream, as well as by prevailing climatic conditions. So that's also the need to forecast temperature has been another push that this science needs assessment work group has made. So thank you for that comment. Any other, Councilmember Natoli?
Yes, thanks, Laurel and Dr. Larson for your presentation. Just wanted to ask, because I think it's timely and kind of goes to Christy's comment as well, but as we look at, operations and management, which is, happens on, a minute-to-minute basis in some cases, but with salinity barriers, and we had a presentation at the commission last night, the Delta Protection Commission, and, some discussion by Department of Water Resources and what they may be contemplating for next year if things continue to, get more serious as it relates to the drought. Is there any suggestion on your part, because part of the recommendation came out as we align some of the scientific research with those, management and operational aspects of the system, but some of those are more, thank goodness, are more either temporal or intermittent. And so how is it we might latch on to, work that's being done this year, obviously with the replacement of the barrier that was put there in 2015 in the Central Delta, but also then what happens, what might happen in North Delta if, as I said, things continue to worsen. So do you have any suggestions about how we might get the science aligned so that we take advantage of those opportunities, which, are there and unfortunately, I guess, because it reflects some of the changes in the stressors, but so I'm curious.
Yeah, there's been a lot of movement in this area recently and underway. Delta Science Program has been communicating and coordinating pretty extensively with Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation on the current actions and the science that is needed to produce a greater understanding of how those interventions are going to impact ecosystems at various scales, as well as impact local human use as well. So, when there's a couple different things I want to say. One is that Delta Science Program has been engaged in extensive synthesis of lessons learned from those operations during the previous drought. And those lessons learned have highlighted several gaps in understanding that we are beginning to come up with ways to address during the drought that we're in currently. The other thing that's happening is that there is planning, it's very tentative still, but there's planning underway for a drought synthesis workshop to take place this winter. It will likely be early in the new year. So this is something that Delta Science Program is leading the discussions on, but in extensive coordination with State Water Resources Control Board, Department of Water Resources, and the Bureau of Reclamation. And in fact, we have several calls set up later today for that to really advance that planning. So stay tuned. And it looks likely that that workshop may focus on salinity, or at least that would be a primary focus of that workshop, if not the exclusive focus. And where I'd like to see us head as an outcome of this workshop is to adopt a planning process to anticipate future drought conditions that's coordinated across interest groups and agencies and involves modeling that integrates multiple variables to look at different scenarios for managing salinity conditions and drought conditions more broadly.
Okay, very good.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and just, and Christy alluded to the report this morning, but, as it relates to temperature, and I know that's becoming more critical by the day, when you talk about synthesizing, this was focused on salinity, but in some other aspects that are related. But what about the temperature piece? How does that fit into the equation?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of temperature related synthesis activities happening within Delta Science program right now. And right now it's a topic of discussion, whether that will also be a focus of the upcoming synthesis workshop. So it's that we're actively discussing, and I think there's widespread recognition of the importance.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Larson.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'll provide the council with updates as we do solidify plans for the focus and scope and interagency coordination involved in this workshop. Any other questions? And I can't see everyone. So Susan, please let me know if there's a raised hand that I'm missing.
Yeah, it's hard with this single row at the top here to see everybody. I don't see any other hands raised.
Great. Well, I will segue then into a brief update on some of the ongoing and upcoming Delta Science program activities. And as many of you know, it's been a really busy week for Delta Science program activities. After the DPIC meeting on Monday, which Amanda Bohl reported to you on, the rest of the week kicked off with the Science Actions workshop for the update to the Science Action Agenda. That was held on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'll just give a brief update on that, but there will be a more detailed update and report out forthcoming in a future council meeting. So as just a general reminder, the Science Action Agenda is a key pillar of the Delta Science strategy and the concept of One Delta, One Science. It is a community-developed, co-produced document that prioritizes science actions at the 5-year timescale in alignment with management needs and specific management questions. The Science Actions workshop that we just had was the final workshop in approximately a year of community-sourced effort. The over 100 participants brainstormed science actions based on the final management needs document that was recently released by the Collaborative Science and Peer Review Unit, which in turn was a product of the top 65 management questions developed in last year's workshops and prioritized via subsequent surveys and a lot of effort on the part of the Delta Science program staff. Now, some of those science actions that were refined and developed at this workshop also originated from knowledge gaps identified in the progress summary assessment of research spurred by the 2017 to 2021 Science Action Agenda. So I don't yet have information on the total number of science actions that were proposed across the different breakout groups within this workshop, because some of those are still under refinement until the end of the close of business today. But I will have some concrete numbers for you at the next council meeting. I will say that the next steps in drafting the update will be for Delta Science program staff to prioritize all of the science actions that originated from the workshop based on a set of prioritization criteria that the workshop participants also contributed to. So I facilitated one of the sessions during the Science Actions workshop and was just really invigorated by the amount of energy that participants from academia, state agencies, nonprofits brought to the table, and people took the task at hand really seriously. And I think the discussion that was generated about what really are the gaps and what really are the areas most in need of scientific progress was, it was really detailed and rich and an excellent experience overall. So I know I'm personally really excited about the next steps in refining these science actions, merging some of them, compiling them to a list of about 25 science actions, and then getting the draft Science Action Agenda out a little bit later this fall. And just as a reminder, we do intend to release the final version of that document in winter after it's gone through a period of public comment. So then on Tuesday this week, the ISB held its monthly meeting, and you did hear an update from Ryan Stambra on Senate Bill 821. We're all really hopeful that this will change the current employment situation that has hampered the ISB over the last year. And you also heard mention from Deirdre Desjardins that the ISB does plan on holding its first post-pandemic in-person meeting in August. That will consist of a field tour of the Delta on August 19th. Many of the newest members of the ISB haven't yet had a chance to actually get out into the Delta and see some of these critical sites. And that will be followed by a half-day meeting on August 20th. Then yesterday, I held my monthly Delta Lead Scientist Ask Me Anything office hours on Instagram Live. This particular session was devoted to highlighting some of the specific work that the council is funding and was reported on in the last council meeting. The co-host for this session was Dr. Tamara Kraus of the U.S. Geological Survey. She's lead PI for a project funded through the PSN titled Harmful Algal Blooms and Cyanotoxins in the Delta, Occurrence, Distribution, Trends, and Environmental Drivers. So there was a really excellent discussion about harmful algal blooms in general, and how the particular algal blooms that we're experiencing in the Delta are different from those occurring elsewhere in the country, and what some of the remaining gaps are. So I encourage you to visit the archive of that session on the Delta Stewardship Council's Instagram site. And I'll just remind you that session was in some ways a follow-up to the June session, in which Dylan Stern, Delta Science Program Manager for Funding, and I discussed mechanisms for funding science in the Delta. And then as my final reminder, these Instagram Live sessions happen at noon on the third Thursday of the month. And then the final kind of on your radar item I'd like to report on is just an update on the Frontiers for Young Minds special issue on the San Francisco Estuary. This is something I mentioned, I think, probably late last year in a lead scientist report. Frontiers for Young Minds is a peer-reviewed journal that's part of a prestigious family of journals. This Frontiers for Young Minds specifically publishes peer-reviewed science papers targeted for 8 to 15-year-olds, which are edited for kids by kids. Delta Science Program staff have been engaged in editing and contributing for a special issue that's entitled Where the River Meets the Ocean, Stories from the San Francisco Estuary. So there are 35 papers in the collection contributed by interagency ecological program agencies in conjunction with local consultants and university collaborators. There's over 65 authors in this issue. And there are a broad spectrum of topics on the estuary, from mice to hydrodynamic modeling. 33 of those 35 papers are now in press or published. And there's a link to an example one of these papers in your packet if you're curious on following up. And then finally, you also have the By the Numbers report in your packet that Karen Gutierrez generated. I'm just going to be really brief here, since we've already heard the situation about really low cumulative precipitation that our watershed has received. But I think the item of interest is that the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers are currently flowing at about 50% of their average volumes, and water project exports are at about 11% of average. So with that, I will end my report and open the floor to any questions or public comments.
Thank you, Laurel. Any questions for Laurel? Okay, any public comment on this item?
I do have Deirdre Desjardins. Her hand is raised. Let's see. Deirdre, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Deirdre Desjardins with California Water Research. And I just wanted to say that we would really hope that studies of salinity impacts in the estuary also consider the issue of water supply reliability for meeting the Bay Delta water quality standards, because there's a significant difference between management of the reservoirs for economic benefits, which is the current model for economic benefits for agricultural and municipal water users, and management for meeting the Bay Delta water quality standards and reducing the risk of needing the kinds of intervention that we had this year with the salinity barriers. And it's a subject I've advocated on for a decade. There was some research by Eris Georgakakos in 2009, which showed that one could greatly reduce the risk of not meeting the water quality standards, and still have, and it also increases water supply reliability for minimizes interruptions. So it reduces the variability in exports. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and I could give some more input, but that's just an example of the environmental and fishing groups have been advocating for taking water supply reliability for the environment into account in managing the Delta for a long time, and we would welcome being part of that conversation and framing that question. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Deirdre. And just to be clear, when I advocate for anticipatory planning, I am advocating for planning that considers ecological, economic, human, recreational, and other human values needs throughout the Delta. Very useful comment.
Okay, any other comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair, there are not.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item 10, preparation for the next council meeting. The next council meeting is August 26, 2021, again, via teleconference. So thank you, council members, for your patience and endurance, and have a great weekend. We'll see you in August.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You did a great job running the meeting too.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you.